Jacksonville. The child was born and couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. With Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
The week that was on the 23rd of December 2017 from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Bostonred Network. It was an interesting week. The Republicans passed in both the House and Senate a sham tax bill. And it is now, as they say, signed by DJ Trump. The stamp of approval is on it. We talked about it on Friday Jobber. We'll have more specifics, obviously, as it comes out. But we'll be looking, as they say, to any updates perhaps they'll have. We have Uncle Carl Rove here, and I think I'll just start with him. Keep Trump off the trail in 2018 is his advice he's writing in the Wall Street Journal. On the 21st of December, the White House is planning a full-throttle campaign to plug the president in the midterm elections, according to Washington Post. Aides insists that DJ Trump wants to travel extensively, hold rallies. He's been doing that, and is looking forward to spending much of 2018 campaigning. If true, this plan should be shelved, making the midterm about DJ Trump is a very bad idea to begin with. He has the worst ratings in his first year of any modern president, no doubt about that. He's been in the 35% at Gallup. By comparison, President Obama ended the first year at 50%, Bill Clinton at 54%, and both watched their parties get shellacked in the midterm election. George H.W. Bush was at 73%. And saw a few seats lost in 1990. But 1990, Uncle Carl, was a different time. If Trump brainstorms for Republican candidates, his unpopularity could rub off on them. Alabama's recent Senate race may be a special case because of the accusations against Judge Roy Moore. But the fact remains the president could not carry Mr. Moore to victory, nor could he carry Luther Strangelove. The fact remains that the 1.3 million votes cast in this single special election exceeded the 1.2 million in the midterm in 2014 in Alabama. Democrat turnout nearly reached presidential levels without a corresponding increase for Republicans. While Trump drew energy from adoring crowds at his rallies, his unscripted moments are also when he's most likely to generate unnecessary controversy. In July, he trashed his predecessor at a nonpartisan Boy Scout jamboree. And in August rally in Phoenix, he defended his remarks that both sides were blamed for the violence in Charlottesville. white power protests and in a September rally for Alabama Senator Luther Strangelove. Trump said he might make a mistake. He might have made a mistake by endorsing him. What candidate would want to deal with that kind of fallout? If the White House tried to recreate last year's presidential campaign in 2018 by holding one ruckus rally after another, it will make Mr. Trump feel beloved while magnifying the GOP's losses. If the president wants to help his party, he should lower his political profile. He's not doing that. In fact, DJ Trump has a new, what they call a presidential corn that they give out to various people with none other than his picture on it and a Make America Great. They give those out to soldiers and various other types. It's gold looking. I don't know if it's solid gold or not. He should raise, early next year, should raise gobbles of money for candidate events closed to the press. Then in the summer and fall, he should attend fundraisers for National Republican Committee, the state parties, and a GOP congressman. Well, he's going to be raising money. They'll be raising a lot of money at stake there. Much of his time should be devoted not to politics, but to policy. Well, he's not a policy person, especially things that will boost his approval numbers. The fact remains that Trump's personal behavior weights down his ratings. His policies, tax cuts, deregulation, energy expansion, strong defense, seriousness on immigration are the most popular, are more popular than he is, especially when you are explaining without his name attached. Well, the problem is on taxation, it's not, because the tax bill has been set up as a sham. Deregulation, people will see. It takes a little while to see that. Energy expiration, that's a little bit different situation, but if the price of gasoline and petrol climbs, then people will see it in a very negative. As far as defense, that's an issue that has perplexed the American body politic for many, many years. Period. The Wilsonian foreign policy, rally around the flag, boys rally around the flag. One of the events we'll have here is the Green Party's candidate, Jill Stein, and the McCarthy attacks on her by the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, I believe, and that her attending a special peace conference of all things in the Russian Federation. There were many, many people there, peace activists, etc. Some of the American types there were ranged from Jesse Ventura to various others that were there, and various peace activists from throughout the world. V.I. Putin did make an appearance. She said he walked in with some big men. It doesn't take very big men to be bigger than V.I. Putin, but she thought they were his bodyguards, but it turned out they were his cronies. Nonetheless, he went from table to table, shook hands with people, a typical Russian type of situation, and said a few words and left. And the conversation, of course, was in Russian, and none of there was not a translator there. But that's not unusual for that to happen in the Russian Federation, the old Soviet Union. Republicans that cannot keep Congress simply by appealing to Trump's most avid fans. Well, no doubt, that fan base is a very interesting fan base. It has evangelicals in it that are looking the other way. The smell does not go to them, as we saw with Roy Moore. We have the white supremacists there, and wannabe white supremacists that are hiding in the closet, and various other elements there. And, of course, then you have the General Republican Party that little Paulie Ryan represents, and they have their agenda, which is a libertarian agenda. Those people are fans of none other than a drug addict, Ayn Rand. They would, what they have done is they've unleashed the corporate tax cuts. They went from 30 whatever it was, 35 or 30 whatever, down to 20%. Or 20 is it 22%? Well, whatever. Anyway, that cut is there, and it's interesting. A gentleman in Silicon Valley who is a freelance in the so-called gig economy, but he's not gigging for Uber. He's working for the Cisco and the likes of various others. I believe there are 3 different ones there. His earnings about $150,000 a year, And he lives in San Francisco, doesn't own a house, so he doesn't have to worry about that deduction going away. Thus, he's getting a 20% reduction in the way his taxes is done for a pass-through. So he's a very happy man. In 2006, but temporarily set aside their double vote for change, he represented and against the prospects of Hillary, the monster Clinton, in the White House or in the Oval Office. The quirk that the way forward is to let Trump be Trump only gives advisors an excuse to ignore the president's divisive rhetoric. Well, the divisive rhetoric is what has been driving Trump along. Such things as America First. If you look at the polls, and you took a very serious look at the polls, a substantial number of Americans will go for American First and will go to his annex because that's what they believe. That is the hardcore Republican base. Now, when you get to leaners and independents, not so much. Needlessly, the personal attacks and narcissistic focus on indefensible management of facts and childlike need for constant praise. In other words, I remember being at a medical center and listening to some senior citizens talk about the baby, and I wonder who in the hell they were talking about a grandchild or something. But they were talking about the baby in the White House, baby Trump. A better goal would be to turn DJ Trump into President Trump. Hope, admittingly rather than remote now, that Mr. Trump could somehow work to become a unifying leader and let go of his seeing things grievance. Then he would explain what he's done and what he wants to do, emphasizing how the agenda will positively affect the lives of ordinary people. Well, the problem here, it just hasn't turned out for DJ Trump. The latest scheme, we were going to talk about a gentleman that worked for McDonnell Douglas out in Oklahoma, and he's 79 now, working at Walmart. We'll put that in our special holiday Happy Christmas program, and I'm not as happy for some. We'll skip that one too. That was about Mr. Mueller from none other than Kenneth Starr. He's not really have anything new there other than to perhaps change things over. But this is a real Trump story from Dana Milback. The cameras go off, and then comes the collapse. President Trump, avoided himself a 10 of 10 score 2 months ago for his response to Hurricane Maria, which leveled Puerto Rico. If you look at real catastrophes like Katrina, and you look at the tremendous hundreds and hundreds of people that died, Trump said as he taunted Puerto Rico, what is your death count? Of course, at that time, he said 17. It was 16 certified. However, of the 16 versus literally 1,000, there 1 week, this week we learned that 1,065 and more Puerto Ricans died in September and October this year than the previous year. Almost a certain storm-related deaths, according to the Center for Investigative Journalism. When all is tallied, the destruction in Puerto Rico is very much on par with Trump's what Trump considers a real catastrophe like a Katrina, but killed 1,800 people. That is low when you start considering that in many places, in the so-called emerging nations, you have routinely floods, various other monsoons that routinely kill thousands of people. A report from Refugees International says thousands of people still lack sustainable access to portable water, electricity, and dry and safe places to sleep. That is terrible. The group faults the Federal Emergency Agency, bureaucrats, and the assistance process. for leaving survivors with enormous challenges, no doubt about that. This is the U.S., United States of America. 10 out of 10, President plus for you. In October, when Trump was tossing toilet paper at Puerto Ricans, he offered lavish praise of aid and said Wall Street lenders were going to say goodbye to Puerto Rico's $72 billion debt. But the debt was not written off, and the disaster relief hasn't been inadequate, piecemeal, no doubt about that. A tax bill, which DJ Trump celebrated with back debt, treats Puerto Rico as a foreign country, imposing a 12.5% tax on income that companies receive there from intellectual property, a big hit there for the critical pharmaceutical, a lot of pharmaceutical and device people in Puerto Rico. Rather than give Puerto Rico special tax treatment, which is urgently needed, Trump and his cronies in the Congress gave employers a powerful reason to move jobs off the island. You might recognize this pattern even if you don't care about Puerto Rico, the suffering of more than 3 million Americans there. Trump in a razor-dazzle and self-congratulations promised great things to come. They haven't come there. The prototype is the Taj Mahal. That was a hotel he had in Atlantic City. In 1990, it opened with much fanfare as the world's largest hotel, a casino. 12 months later, it defaulted on payments, and 9 months after that, it filed for bankruptcy. This is a history of DJ Trump. It's up and down over the numbers, man. That's our macroeconomics program. We have the seesaw model, and we're starting to see some seeing and sawing in the economy. Nearly 1 million low-income Puerto Ricans are in danger of losing health care early in the new year. The territory's Medicaid program will soon be unable to pay providers. Federal law restricts Medicaid reimbursement from Puerto Rico to not quite 20%, about a quarter of what it would get if it were state. Puerto Rican leaders have called for a few billion to alleviate that crisis, and of course Congress has not answered. And the fool that happens to be the governor there, Ricardo Rosello, made a mistake when he put praise on DJ Trump. Now in Politico, he vows to mobilize the 5 million Puerto Ricans that are living in New York, Florida, and wherever else to vote in the 2018-2020. That is an interesting situation there. Now, Democrats who supported the spending bill, this is the spending bill, face a backlash to keep the government moving. Many of them did that. Latino activists, the Dreamers, had protests in some of the offices. Chuck Schumer's office, I believe, shouted shame on, this is Senator Kane of Virginia, who said he voted for the measure to prevent a partial government shutdown and protect workers. He is from Virginia, has a lot of workers in his particular state that he represents. Every single Democrat who voted for the continuing resolution just voted to deport Dreamers and leave kids without access to health insurance. That is from Marsh Ziad. He's the political director of Credo Action. They sell phones. Anyway, the internal party dilemma is sure to increase the pressure on Schumer and Pelosi to pass the Dreamer Act in January, when the last stopgap measure spending bill will expire. A new poll and pressure from activists may play a role in her thinking. On Wednesday, the University of California at Berkeley's Institute of Government Studies released a survey showing her lead by 14 points in a race against Kevin DeLone, the Democrat leader in the California Senate. DeLone, who has been in the race only for 2 months. Now, This is with Dianne Feinstein. Let me make that clear. Old Dianne Feinstein's been around, as LBJ would say, since Christ was a corporal. The push for immigration legislation erupted in September after DJ Trump vowed to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, that is DECA, and which was instituted by Barack Obama. Pelosi and Schumer pledged to enshrine the protection of the DECA law as quickly as possible. They're working on it, but it doesn't work out that way. Luis Garreta, I never pronounced his name right. He's from Illinois. In fact, he's retiring. He is a leader of the Latino or Hispanic Conference, into a bitter showdown with Schumer. Garreta shouted back, telling Schumer, "Don't raise your voice," Schumer told her, to stop insulting his fellow Democrats. Oh, well. That shows there are limits to electoral politics, period. In addition, Unite to Dream, an immigration advocacy group, dispatched the protesters to the Hill, announced that it would go after Democrats that are now the deportation of caucus. Well, what good that will do? Probably not very much, unfortunately. And they put names down here of Tammy Baldwin. Tammy Baldwin, one of our favorites, is in a bitter re-election race in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, of course, ruled by a Boss Walker. Sherrod Brown is in Ohio. It's a state that the Democratic Party needs to do much, much organizing in. And Senator Casey of Pennsylvania, another state the Democratic Party really has to do organizing in. It was a disgrace that they lost Pennsylvania, but they had a candidate in the Crooked Hillary. It didn't work out. And if 9 more Democrats had opposed the bill, it would have stalled, giving Unite the Dream strategic ally. Well, it wasn't going to happen. Bill Nelson, who is from Florida, was not among them. Earlier this week, Nelson had left open the possibility of opposing the spending bill as protesters camped out in his office. He ultimately is supported. He's up for re-election also, which is a tricky situation in a state like Florida, that you have a lot of conservative voters down there, and you have to placate them to keep the seat. And what has happened, electoral politics in 2017, 2018 is very, very messy. You have these multiple constituencies here, and you have some states that are not really affected as much by this so-called immigration thing. In fact, out of the Southwest, there's very little effect. Now, the Dreamers are a little bit different. These were children brought here by their parents, and they, for the most part, are college students, etc., what one would call productive members of the society, and thus allowing them to stay, and there's a process where they can complete their citizenship. But that is a very slow thing. Those 32 Democrats who voted for this bill to deport Dreamers, that is Angela Padilla, the policy director of the Invisible Project. There are 4,000 DECA recipients will lose their status now and on the 19th of January. Yeah, that's an unfortunate. Dreamers make up hundreds of thousands of Dianne Feinstein's constituents while talking a good game on the Dreamers when it comes to standing up and supporting them. She is AWOL. You don't hear that word much. You did in my time when we had it all a draft. The California's top 2 primary system, which produces an all-Democratic, produced it in 2016, may put Feinstein in a prolonged race with Dion. Yeah, even after siding with activists, progressives plan to hold Feinstein accountable. That's one of the problems out in California. You have the internal Democratic Party in California that is the party that supported Hillary Clinton. Then you have progressive people like Dion and others there, but they have really not come to the forefront. This is what it happens, that you have to organize people. We applaud people out in California that have been trying to organize, like the civil rights attorney there, Sandra Fluke. We always retweet her tweets there, but this again is one of the differences in California. You have Sandra, and then you have people like the Bernie activists. I'm not sure how close she is to them, but you do have some of these, what I call leftovers, the Feinstein people who have been around a long time. That's the traditional quote-unquote liberals, and you have to separate those out from the progressives, but California is gradually moving in the other direction. Feinstein just gave Dion a much-needed opening, said Marcus Martellus. He's a Berkeley-based founder of the Progressive Blog, and this is the Daily Cause. Okay. It just reminds core Democrats that we can't count on Feinstein. They can't. Feinstein's in the 80s. She's been around a very long time. She's a more progressive, get-along Democrat. I would put her as more moderate. When she was even mayor of San Francisco, she was a more in the moderate wing. And that's one of the things that's happened. Those kinds of politicians, like Hillary Monster Clinton, come from the old school, and to a certain extent Nancy Pelosi does too. And their days are quote-unquote numbered. Politics are changing. The nation is very, very stratified, I guess we'll use that term, and polarized. So now you have hard right, of which DJ Trump is there. He's destroying the environment by the day in various states. I was just looking at in Minnesota, the wildlife range in northern Minnesota. They're going to start doing some nickel mining there. And these kinds of things are going on all over. So there has to be a common strategy against the ultra-right Republican Party. So you have to bring environmentalists together. You have to bring civil rights people together under one big Our Revolution Bernie Sanders tent. Now is the time to move forward with this. It doesn't matter as much as this stage of the game, where you have a big quote-unquote tent all people's a third party, whether you go the direction of Bernie Sanders getting these progressive candidates elected. Because these progressive candidates, one thing to remember, that these candidates may be running on the Democratic Party, but they are not the types of Democrats, Pelosi and these various other Schumer and all these characters that are more integrated with a business. And now, from the other side of the thing, you look at their constituents who will elect them. Now, in Virginia, it's a little different now, a little more progressive people coming up. But in Bill Nelson's situation in Florida, there are obviously progressives in Florida, but they have not come to the forefront of Florida politics. There are a couple of things going on there. Big things. You've got the Cubans that are holding the right in Florida. You got some other Latinos that don't turn out as high. You got severe voter depression going on there, and you at the same time, you got the Schwartz Weissman Schwartz operation there going on. So you got some of those types of Democrats that are around, but you do have good people there. Just as a man we talk about here, Stetson Kennedy, was a good man. He was a progressive, and he did good work in Florida. The problem we have is he worked from the 30s on. We don't have enough of those people in Florida, but they're coming. Same way in Texas. We were looking at it tonight. Trump won Texas by less than 10 points, period. It was 9, whatever it was. But the situation is, as the progressives in Texas organize and get better organized, that 9% will drop down to less than 5%. And you're going to see a market change in Texas. What's holding Texas back is the rural vote and people that really don't understand their position in the body of politics. Let me move on here. The gold coin, I won't spend much time on that. The Trumpian Meko, the presidential coin, it's called. It's been around for 2 decades. I guess, well, it's 20 years. If I was longer than that. Has been replaced by an eagle-bearing signature. The challenge coin, it's called, is undergoing. The presidential seal has been replaced by an eagle-bearing Trump signature. The eagle's head faces right, not left. The 13 arrows representing the original states have disappeared. The motto, in pluribus uma, that's a Latin phrase meaning out of many, one is gone. And sit on each side of the thing is Make America Great Again, a trivial thing of history arriving there. Let's go on here. We have the Pew Center here. We don't want to leave the Pew Center out. We got to find the Pew Center. Here we go. From MAG to Me Too, a look at U.S. public opinion. The first year of DJ Trump's presidency represents a clear break in style and substance from his predecessor, Barack Obama. And for many of the chief executives who came before them, the business type turned politician up into Washington with unrestricted rhetoric and America First, which is a nationalistic, incidentally, agenda, including renegotiating trade pacts, withdrawing from worldwide climate change agreements, curtailing immigration to the U.S. At home and abroad, the public reacted strong to the White House new occupant and his policies. Confidence in the U.S. president plunged in many countries, particularly in Western Europe, where opinions of Americans itself also declined. In the U.S., already widely partisan gaps on fundamental political values even grown wider. The relationship between the press, with a majority seeing it unhealthy, no doubt about that. Dan Rabb has talked about that. We follow his news and guts. A substantial share in both parties, particularly women, say they are paying more attention to politics since the election of DJ Trump. The Democrats were overwhelmingly negative in their assessment of Trump, who came into office vowing to undo President Obama's policies, including the Obamacare from 2010, and a program that shielded 800,000 young unauthorized people. We just talked about that. Republicans were by the arrival of the first GOP president in 8 years, cheered his successful nomination of Neil Goshen. Goshen, a right-wing. His mother was a right-winger, too, unfortunately. While some GOP members of Congress found themselves at odds with the unconventional outspoken, but he's doing their agenda. Trump's contentious first year was among the defining stories of 2017. But beyond the shifts in policy and approach that accomplished the transition between administrations, the year revealed other important trends shaping American society. Allegations of sexual misconduct against powerful men in entertainment politics from Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein to Matt Lauer, the long-serving congressman who was unfortunately pushed out, John Conyers Jr. of Detroit, brought widespread attention to the issue of sexual harassment, gender discrimination, and gender equity. The Me Too campaign, which spread rapidly on Twitter and Facebook in the wake of these stories, prompted women around the country to share their stories and personal experience with sexual misconduct. Time selected the Person of the Year in December, an award that DJ Trump claimed he won, was not one person but a broad range of people who came forward. The Pew Center survey underscores the breadth of these experiences as well as the public attitude towards them. The poll was conducted early fall. About 4 in 10 American women said they have a personal experience gender discrimination and been treated unfairly. In a separate survey, many employed women reported an array of experiences with gender discrimination. We did a story on gender discrimination at the Ford plant in Chicago. We asked you to check it out. Racial issues continue to drive the national attention. The removal of the Confederate flag by local governments. I haven't seen much about that. But the white nationalist demonstrations in Charlottesville, Virginia, where Heber was killed, brutally murdered by white supremacists, and we rally around that. Discussions of race extended to other venues, the NFL. And the reason we're boycotting the NFL began with some players' protest perceived, well, I wouldn't use the word perceived, it is racial injustice and police mistreatment of African Americans by kneeling during the national anthem, move that provoked anger from old DJ Trump, and they didn't care. Against this backdrop, the public expressed rising concern about racial relations. In August, the survey conducted shortly after the violence in Charlottesville, nearly 6 in 10 Americans said they view racism as a big problem in the U.S., up 8 percentage points from 2015. Surprised not more than that. Democrat-leaning independents were far more likely than Republicans and Republican leaners to see racism as a big problem, no doubt about it. They're part of the problem. The economy brought positive news. The national employment rate fell to 4.1% in October and November, the lowest since 2000. The Dow average broke 20,000 point in January, the first time it soared to more than 2,400 points by the end of the year. Americans' evaluation of the economy also improved. 4 in 10 rated the economy as excellent or good, the highest share in a decade. Gun violence took an especially deadly toll in 2017. In October, a person killed 58 people in Las Vegas, Nevada. The Steve Suisi, one of the high-ranking members, was shot in the Congress. He's since returned. Complex relationships with guns include some fundamental divides between gun owners and non-gun owners, Democrats and Republicans. It's beyond that. A lot of gun owners are in favor of banning the automatic weapons. Said gun laws should be more strict than they are today. For instance, only a quarter of the Republican leaners, as 24%, agreed, while most Republicans, 56%, said there would be less crime in America if everybody owned a gun. Well, everybody's owned a gun, whereas 15% of the Democrats. Large partisan gaps were evident across many issues. The center asked Trump's proposal wall on the border. I don't hear as much about that now, but supposedly he's got a prototype ready. One area that starkly divides the parties, the investigation by the special counsel, Robert Mueller, into allegations between the Trump's presidency and the Russian Federation. That's now expanded, at least by the House, into Jill Stein's campaign. In the survey fielded in November and December, only a quarter of the Republicans, 26%, said Trump officials definitely or probably had improper conduct with the Russians during the campaign. By contrast, 8 in 10 Democrat leaners, 82% thought the situation was there, while nearly 7 in 10 Democrats, 68%, were confident it would be fair. Just 44% of Republicans, in some cases partisanships, in opinion, were dramatic amongst Trump's persistent criticism of CNN and other media as fake news, lupin press, for example, partisan differences over the role of the press as a watchdog were wider than 30 years ago, according to the Pew. In March, the Democrats were roughly twice as likely as Republicans to say criticism from news organizations kept political leaders from doing things that they shouldn't be done. That is 89% versus 42%. The center last asked the question in January, February. Well, that's a long time ago. And the split there was, Democrats were 74 and Republicans were 77. The federal government's handling of natural disasters. Now we get into Puerto Rico. Hurricane Maria, in the survey, this was last year, 9 in 10 Republicans and leaners, 88% said the federal government is doing a good job responding to natural disasters. View share only by 51% of Democrats. In October 2015, a 4-point gap between the two parties, 82 and 78 is. Not only it should divide the country along partisan lines, Americans across the spectrum expressed rising worry. Now, this is back to Cold Warism here of the Democratic Republic of Korea. 3/4 of Americans said in October they view quote-unquote North Korea's nuclear program as a major threat. It is not. That is up from 64% in January as a largest share there. Now, that's a Trumpian issue that could literally cause World War III. But Americans still rally around that. Why is that happening? That's because of the racist Wilsonian policy that Hillary the Monster Clinton used, or as they now call them, the neoliberals. Whatever. Neo-right-wing liberals, right-wing progressives, here they go, rally, rally, rally. Anyway, both parties, majority in America, also agree upon some perceived security threats facing U.S. cyber attacks launched by other companies to terrorist groups known as the Islamic State. We don't hear as much about them. One of the things to remember about the so-called Islamic State, that was a creation, literally, of a few intelligence agencies, the Mossad, the CIA, the British intelligence agencies, etc., created these groups, put their quote-unquote leadership out there. Now, other people join the groups. They don't necessarily do the recruiting on the lower level. That is left to functionaries, and they let those functionaries run willy-nilly. It all goes back to the 11th of September 2001. Remember that. As of 2017 draws to a close, some of the stories that define the year will continue to unfold, no doubt about that. A little sign, for example, the crisis on the Korean Peninsula will disappear. It will not, nor will stories about sexual misconduct. One of the problems, unfortunately, with sexual misconduct is that it is highlighted. Example, Al Franken, he will resign on the 2nd of January. Never got due process, nor did John Connors Jr. of Detroit. Now, had they let those cases play out, they would have had due process, they would have had some report, and they would have had something to work on. But what did they do? They ran Senator Franken out of the Senate and John Conyers Jr. out of the House. And the situation is even more dire in Detroit. There will be no senator, no representative in Detroit from that district because of Gateway Snyder, the Republican that's running the operation there. They'll just go to 2018 for some sort of puppeteer election. Now, in Minnesota, it's different. They are appointing a replacement senator named Tina Smith. Ms. Smith goes to Washington. Not sure how happy that'll be and what machinations there. But in Minnesota, there are even more machinations going on there. And we'll do this. Well, we'll do the Minnesota story. The only reason we're doing it here is that on our extended version, it's sort of kooky. So you're going to have to hold your breath to figure this one out. This is what the Republicans are doing, not what the Democrats are doing in Minnesota. Let's see. Here's their scheme right here. This mind-boggling as a governor there. Anyway, they want what the GOP legislatures call for a special session to keep their party's majority in wake of the reshuffling caused by Senator Franken's resignation. I'm calling him that. Republican leaders in the legislature, this is in Minnesota, are trying to hang on to their party's majority. The Senate president, her name is Michelle Fleshback, a Republican, is expected to ascend to the lieutenant governors when Tina Smith is sworn in the Senate. The House Speaker, Kurt Durf, and the majority leader Paul Zizaka have devised a plan that would ensure they hold on to the state's Senate majority by sending a Democrat Dayton's second. By sending a Democrat to be Dayton's second in command. The letter made public. The pair asked for a short session on the 3rd of January to elect a DFL Senate president who would become the lieutenant governor. That means Fleshbach, is that her name? Yeah, Fleshbach, would be reelected as Senate president, keeping the Senate slim Republican majority there. So in other words, they see the idea, the Republicans there, of having Fleshbach in as head of the Senate rather than as lieutenant governor. So this is a scheme there. The common sense solution would honor the wishes of Minnesota voters who in 2014 elected Democratic governor, Democratic lieutenant governor. Very interesting. The vacant seat otherwise would prompt on the special election on top of one to replace Senator Dan Shewan. It's on the 12th. That's somebody that was forced to resign. A lot of machinations are going on here, period. Now, from the DFL side, Dayton, his news conference Thursday, said he'd be open to a special session like the ones Gazagler and company, but only if DFL leaders in the Senate and the House signed off on it. No comment from one here. Anyway, Dayton also said Thursday that he wouldn't call for Fleshbach's replacement in a special election until she gives up her legislative seat. Fleshbach said she hopes to keep both jobs, but that's just silly. The length of the double duty is up to debate, the legality, and that was an opinion we reported last night from Lori Swanson. She is the Attorney General of Minnesota. Now, the Senate thing here in Minnesota is by one of these again, a 34-32 lead with one seat vacant. So, in other words, this thing could turn out in Minnesota. Very contentious situation there. So to keep things, as they say, tup. We'll go the other direction, I suppose. All right. And let me just make sure that we have the right one up here. We'll go to ESPN, and this is not it. Yeah. Anyway, we'll get the new ESPN one up here. Here we go. Anyway, from the National Basketball Association here, this was on Friday night. The Knickerbockers were in Detroit with the Pistons, 104 for the Pistons, 101 for the Knicks. And let's see, get on here. The Pelicans and Magic. Pelicans 111-97 for the Magic. The Wizards and Nets in New York. Nets 119-84. The Mavericks were at the Heat. Heat 113-101. The Clippers were at the Rockets in Houston. Clippers rocketed by the Rockets 128-118. And the Hornets and Bucks in Milwaukee. Oh, wait a minute. Excuse me. Yeah. Bucks 109, Hornets 104. The Hawks were in Oklahoma City. The Thunder 120-117. Close game there. The Nuggets and Trailblazers out in Oregon. The Nuggets found some gold in Oregon at 102-85 for the Trailblazers. The Lakers and Warriors in Northern California. The Warriors 113-102. And look at college ball here. What happened on Friday night? UAB and Ohio 41-6. That was on there. And we have Central Michigan and Wyoming. Wyoming was all over Central Michigan, 37-14. So that is what's happened in college football. What do we have coming up on the 24th, on Sunday? Fresno State and Houston, and then we get into skip a leg to Tuesday, Utah and West Virginia. This will do it for us. We'll have on Sunday special programming known as Happy Christmas, and the Monday morning quarterback on, that'll be Christmas Eve. Wait a minute, let me figure this out here. This is mind-boggling. On the Happy Santa Day, which is the 25th, we'll have the Monday morning quarterback as normally we have it, and then we'll sort of move on there. Incidentally, we're working on another paranormal program here. The late, great Jerry Pippin specialized in it. We used to kid him about the little green men. Well, we'll have the little green men via the memory from Jane catalog featuring actually Jerry Pippin. We'll try to get a little research in, some up-to-date matters, 10 minutes or so, before we go to the late, great Jerry Pippin. Nonetheless, have a good holiday weekend, everyone. A happy Christmas, as Alistair Cook would say to all. And to others, well, just be happy.